Has been started. Let it give it a second to kick in. Okay, yeah. Once again, our first of all, happy Friday. Thank you for joining for another session of Azure Power Lunch. Quick disclaimer: this call is being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. And this call is joined by our Microsoft team members and members from our customers and partners. Okay. So, with our topic of discussion today, it is Azure API Management latest updates. Um, Here is the quick agenda. So, just like we always do, we're going to level set on the service itself, which is API management, spend a few minutes on it. And then we're going to talk about the, um, the latest update, which is the ability to connect to the API management gateway over a private endpoint. This is a big ask. I'm sure you may have seen it. Um, you know, um, a number of forums people have asked about it. They have released it in public preview. Just keep in mind it is in public preview. I forgot to mention it on the slide, but there are links in the documentation, and you will see it is in public preview. It's not GA yet. Okay, we're going to talk about that. I mean, what it is, how you can do it, and we will also discuss the different network connectivity option for API management and how each one is different and what you may want to use for different scenario. And of course, we will go through a demo and the usual stuff. And please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. At the moment, I am unable to see the chat. So if somebody is nice enough, I mean, they can open the mic and read the questions, or yeah, that would be great. So with
Naveed, I'm
that,
happy
let's.
to take that. So please feel
Hey,
free to put any questions on the chat. I'll read them
thanks,
out.
Allah. Thank you,
Make
man.
sure, man.
We appreciate it, man. Um, so API management is Microsoft's API gateway. It basically provides three components. One, the heart is the API gateway, which provides the abstraction between or separates the API implementation from its presentation. So your API may be implemented in SOAP. You want to expose it in REST, gateway will do that. Vice versa. You apply policies to the gateway. And what are policies? For example, you want to control rate limit APIs. You have some beta APIs that you don't want to put load on. You may have different type of API sources, one for premium customer, one for regular customer, or you are changing implementation of an API, things like that. And you can do it behind the scene without impacting your customer. So that's your API gateway. Okay. The other piece is the developer portal. Developer portal is where developer can access their APIs. They can, you know, kind of get their keys and things like that. That's for a scenario where you are mostly monetizing your API, or your API is used with a very large audience and you don't want to go into the key management thing. So that's where you expose this developer portal, and you can use that. Last piece of it is the administrative portal. Administration portal used to be a separate portal. It's been deprecated. All of that functionality is now a part of Azure portal, but that's where you do the administration. That's where you expose the APIs, basically what we call import. Import the APIs into API management from your functions, from existing services that you may be running somewhere, things like that. So that's what this is all about. And just like some other services like app service, there are two ends of the network connectivity of API management. One is inbound, which is a consumer accessing an API, calling an API through the gateway. That's the inbound. Then there is an outbound network connectivity, which is gateway calling the backend services. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through different network models, especially this public preview. This concept will be very important. Okay, so with that, I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of different connectivity and things like that. So that's pretty much that I want to talk about API management. So what is this private link support? With this support, first of all, I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of private link. Private link is a network level capability that allows you to access first party and third party services, first party Azure services and third party services over a private endpoint. Okay. So let's say you have storage account, you want to access it over a private endpoint. You can create a private endpoint to the storage account, blob store, for example, and that's how you access it. And if that uh, in your in your virtual network, you drop that private endpoint. And if that virtual network is connected to on-prem using ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN, you can basically access that storage account from on-prem as well through that private endpoint. Okay, so with this support, now APIM Gateway has APIM Gateway, you can access it over a private endpoint. Just keep in mind, this is only the inbound connectivity. So you can access an API over a private endpoint. This is very important. And this with this connectivity, what you can do is you can create a private endpoint for API management gateway, and this is only supported for the managed gateway, not for the self-hosted gateway that you create a container and run it on-prem. Okay, so this is supported for the managed gateway. This is available for all SKU, basic, standard, premium, developer, all of them are covered with that. And with that, what you do is you create a private endpoint and drop it into the VNet. And after that, you should be able to access APIM through that private endpoint. Once again, let me be very careful. APIM gateway through that private endpoint. Okay. Portal access will still be through Azure portal. Okay. And that is the whole management and thing is not covered by the at the moment with the private endpoint. Okay, this is specifically for the APIM gateway. Okay, so that's that. And as you can see here from this diagram, you dropped a private endpoint and resources in the VNet, services running in the VNet can access it. If you have a peered VNet, those services can access that private endpoint. If that VNet is connected to on-prem through ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN, then on-prem services can access it through that private endpoint. Um, and just a quick clarification, um, when you create a private endpoint to an Azure API Management Gateway, by default, it does not block public access. Okay. Uh, for example, if you have an app service, okay, you create a private endpoint to that. As soon as you create the private endpoint, the public access to that app service is blocked. You can no longer access that app service over a public endpoint. It will give you 403 error. Okay. But in the case of API management gateway, even though you create a private endpoint to it, you can still access the gateway over a over the through public network access. Okay, through internet or that you have to explicitly disable, and we will talk about it more in the next few slides and in the demo. Okay. Any questions before we jump into a quick demo? Okay. So
There's maybe one question real quick, if you don't mind.
please.
I see APIs. I mean, primarily, and correct me if I'm coming with a wrong, sort of setup here. But APIs are mainly there to like centralize or simplify access to backends, or
Mhm.
that's one reason, right? For operational systems, right? I see more and more questions from customers regarding basically using APIs for decision support systems, potentially pulling large volumes of data through those APIs. and considerations, sort of pro and cons that could be interesting on when to use that type of API and stuff like that. Thanks.
So your question is when to use what type of API, is it right?
Yeah, I mean, what design consideration would you have when you pull like
Large
terabyte
amount of
volumes of
data?
yeah,
Yeah.
terabytes,
Let
right? Is that even practical? Is it
I don't think
recommended?
so, man. I don't
Yeah,
think. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think APIs are there to deal with
Same
uh,
here. Yeah,
messages and things like that. You may have a service that process that data
yeah.
and maybe expose the results through an API, and probably
Right.
we will, we will take a look at it, maybe separately,
Got it. Got it.
separate
Yep,
discussion.
makes sense. Thank you.
So is GraphQL can help there, like which can filter the API results and then only fetch the selected data. So rather than dumping in a big amount of information from APIs to the consumer. So just an idea I'm throwing. So sorry, I do not want to hijack. Naveed, it's all yours. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, definitely there are other ways. I mean, the GraphQL is supported through um, APIM, but definitely, I mean, I think we'll have to look at the use case deeper, probably,
Yep.
to understand that. So,
David,
coming
question from
back
the
to,
chat.
yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, before we close, please. So the question is just clarifying. So this doesn't replace the internal VNet deployment for APIM, correct?
Yeah, no, not at all. We will talk about it. We're gonna go through all the different models and see what are commonalities, what are differences, and what you can and cannot do. So just wait a few minutes. Yeah,
All right,
we'll come into
Haitham,
that.
come back with the follow up, Haitham,
Yeah,
because I read only part of the question, but let's we'll see if the slides covers it, and
yeah,
come back
slide will
with
cover it. Yeah,
right.
absolutely, will cover it. So this is API management. This is the gateway URL, developer portal URL, different things. Let's scroll down here. You wanna, and what you do is go into network. And it's in deployment and infrastructure network. And by the way, I'm just showing it from portal. You can do it from CLI or PowerShell, whatever tool of your choice. As you can see, I have already created the private endpoint, but let's see how the experience look like. If you have created any private endpoints, this experience should be very familiar. This is kind of a same screen. You pick a region. I'm gonna pick East US. I'm gonna do test PE, and this is your virtual network. It picks everything. It picks, okay, this is a service resource. The target sub resource is gateway at the moment. That's the only resource that is available. The next thing is you pick virtual network where you want to drop it. I pick this virtual network, and then the usual stuff. Okay, hold on. Let me pick a different one. Or yes, this is the client sub. And next, and then you create it. It will take a few minutes to create it. Once you create it, the private endpoint is there. So, just like a kind of a cooking show, we already baked the cake, and we have already created a private endpoint in that VNet, and then we have a VM that is running in the same VNet. So, let me go to that, VM. So here is the virtual machine that I'm running there, and let me show you. This is the APIM that is in the same, I'm accessing from there, and these are all the APIs that are there. I have this demo 6 API, just some very simple example API that I had, and I'm going to access this API from this particular VM. And let's send the request. Okay, I'm able to access it. As you can see, 200 OK response, all good. Now let's go back here and let's try to access it. Okay, let me move that client here. This is simple REST client. I'm going to try to access it from my machine, which has no connectivity to that VNet. So just think of it. I have a VM that is running in the same VNet. It has connectivity to that private endpoint. I can go in and I can access it from that VM. On the other hand, my machine, my local machine that has no connectivity to that VNet, so I'm getting a 403 access denied. Just keep in mind, as I have mentioned before, by default, it will not disable the public network access. This is the command that you have to run. I have highlighted it. I have put that in the documentation as well. This is the command that you have to run to disable public network access explicitly, and it takes a few minutes to run. So just keep in mind, if you want to disable public network access for your API management completely, uh, from the API management gateway completely, and you want to only access it from the private endpoints, you have to run this command. There is no CLI. This is a REST API that you have to call. I showed you the parameter. And by the way, this is in the documentation as well. You can see that there as well, and you can, um, you know, call it. It's in the documentation, the official documentation. They have all also mentioned that. Okay, that's why I'm not able to access it. If you just create a private endpoint, you will still be able to access the APIM gateway over the public internet. Okay, so that's that. Okay, now let's come to. Oh, just one thing I want to show you. Let's go back here just to prove out the point that we are accessing the gateway over a private endpoint. Look at this. This is the gateway URL. If I do NS lookup 10.8.255.18, this is the private endpoint address that we have created. Okay. So with that, let's quickly go back to our slides. We need to talk about some very important stuff. So this is some of the key features in regards to with the private endpoint support, of course. That's why private endpoints are there, so, provide protection from data exfiltration and things like that. I don't want to read out the slide. Um, you get it. I mean, this is basically a private endpoint feature. Okay, now this is, I think, very important key part with this new private endpoint connectivity model. What networking model is for you or for your customer? Okay, so first of all, let's start with the um, virtual network external. In that case, you take a APIM instance, inject into VNet, and you have a public IP, and you can access that instance over a public IP, your gateway, and all that. At the same time, your APIM is able to connect to the resources inside the VNet on the backend. So if you have services running in the VNet, running in peered VNets, running on-prem, which is connected to the VNet through site-to-site VPN or express route, you're all good. Okay, you can do that. This is the external model. Keep in mind, this is only supported for developer and premium instances. Okay. Second one, VNet internal. This is the model where you inject a APIM instance inside the VNet, no public internet, no public IP, only have a private and a private address. I shouldn't say private endpoint, only have a private address. You can call it through that private address, and you have to set up your DNS and all that stuff. At the same time, APIM can call the backend services inside the VNet, peered VNet, or on-prem through ExpressRoute or site-to-site VNet. Okay. Once again, this is only supported for developer and premium. The third one, which is in public preview, this is a capability that is supported for all instances, basic, standard, premium. But keep in mind, only when they are not VNet injected. If you inject an APIM instance into the VNet, you cannot create a private endpoint. This is very important. Just keep that in mind. Okay. And It only, with private endpoint, you're only connecting into the APIM gateway over a private endpoint. APIM gateway access background services, you know, over public internet. If they are Azure services, they will go over the Azure, but it will go to their public address. It cannot access services inside a VNet. That is not there. Okay. So this is, you cannot mix those two models. You cannot have a VNet injected service and put a private endpoint on top of it. It has to be running in the Azure multi-tenant environment, non-VNet injected, then you can create private endpoint to it. But at the moment, if you have any backend services that are running inside a VNet, they will have to be accessed through some other means, like some gateway or something like that, or some other means you have to expose those services or do something like that for APIM to access those. Okay. Um, but with the both external and internal VNet injected model, you can access services inside the VNet and all that, but they're only supported for developer and premium. Any questions? And does that answer the question that we had earlier?
Hey, Naveed, is there a diagram that explains this? Because this is such an difference, and our customers, I'm sure some of them will be confused. So it will be
Yeah,
nice to
I
show the
think
diagram.
I think not a diagram, but this is a table, and this is very well. By the way, I have a link there in the documentation which goes over it very in a detailed way and clearly explain like that this there is no mix and match that is supported at the moment. So you cannot have a VNet injected service and a private endpoint. You can either have a private endpoint or you can have a VNet injected service. You cannot have both at the same time. So,
Hi, Naveed.
so
This is Hatham. Thanks for that clarification. Just to confirm,
mhm.
because I like the way you're wording it. It's similar to app services, right? Basically, private endpoints here just for ingress, but the
Yes,
same way with
ingress.
app services, you require VNet integration for outbound. You're
Yep.
saying the only way to achieve outbound connectivity to private, internal, on-prem, backend APIs or origins is through one of those two models at the
Yeah.
top.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
exactly. So if
perfect.
your
Thank you.
customer is looking for, I mean, okay, and let's spend a 1 minute on this. Let's say all your services are running in backend services are running in Azure, in app service, and in functions and things like that. What you can do is you can use this private endpoint model, connect to these services. APIM does support managed identity. You can lock it with the managed identity and just keep in mind every APIM instance has an IP address that is fixed for that instance that will never change unless until that you recreate that APIM instance. Okay, so you can lock that, you can put that IP address in the firewall of your functions or app service, so they only receive requests from that APIM instance. So with managed identity, and with this IP-based firewall, you can kind of protect it. You don't have to have them, you don't have to use the VNet injected instance just to use those services. But if you have services that is running in VMs, you have to find a way to expose them, use some sort of a firewall or app gateway or something, and that's how APIM will connect. But then just or use the VNet injected instance. You cannot have both.
So that's where it is still, VNet internal and external, basically option two are still useful to the customer if they want to do that, but they have to
Absolutely.
pay the premium price. Yeah.
Absolutely. The thing is, I mean, there is no right or wrong answer here.
Yeah.
It's does your customer need that? And one solution for private connectivity that I have seen a few customers implement, they are using VNet injected instance, but VNet injected instance has this thing that you have a private IP address, but there is no ability to create a private link on top of it. And they have some consumer who want to access this API instance over private, through private link. What they have done is they put a few VMs, kind of a scale set Linux VMs as a proxy, put a standard load balancer, create their own private link service, and put that IP address behind that service. Okay, so they're just doing IP forwarding. And that's how they are able to create those private endpoints. And so, yeah, of course, it will have some maintenance overhead, extra cost, but that's one workaround that is there for those instances if you want that capability. But at the moment, if you need the built-in capability of private endpoint, no, it is not. You cannot mix and match. This is, I just want to make sure everybody understand that point. And we have 3 minutes. I need to talk about one important thing as well, compute platform. And I will tell you why I am talking about it. So this is in public domain. So these are the compute platform that API management uses. If you have a consumption instance, it is running on app service behind the scene. If you have the old API instances, they must be running on cloud service. If if today you go in and create an API instance from the portal, it will be running on VM scale sets. Okay. If you're creating the API instance from the what you call from some tools like infrastructure as code, you have to specify a certain API version, and that is very well documented. Then it will create the this single tenant V2 model. Why it is important? This, read the third line. For the preview is only supported for STV2. This is the latest model. So just make sure if you are creating API instance from the portal, no issue there. But if you are using some infrastructure as code like Terraform, like ARM, make sure you look at the API version that it matches what is in the document. Okay, I have the link there. Please take a look at that. That is important. Otherwise, you will be surprised that, oh, I have created the API instance, but I'm unable to create a private endpoint to it because it's only supported for STV2. Okay. So with that, that's pretty much it. Any questions? We have 1 more minute.
Nothing in the chat, Naveed.
Okay, great. So I hope everybody has some good takeaways from this session, and hope to see everyone next week for another session of Azure Power Lunch. And have a wonderful Friday, everyone, and great
Naveed,
weekend.
just from the chat, just please share the deck saying in the chat.
Yeah.
I know Naveed does that, but yeah.
Yeah, the deck, always remember, if you go to our session in YouTube channel, the deck is in the description. The link to deck is in the description. So, so you just go into that YouTube channel, look in the description, the link to the deck will be there. Okay. Yeah, and I will post it as soon as. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your support, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Good.
Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day and great weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Naveed. Thanks, team.